aviator, adventurer, and inventor. He had found himself in financial difficulties when Wing Commander F.W., better known as Fred Winterbottom, the head of the Secret Intelligence Service Air Section, recruited him in the 1930s to head up the flying side of a new SIS reconnaissance operation. It was very necessary indeed as war clouds were gathering in Europe and traditional sources of intelligence were drying up. One question was which aircraft to use. I'm sure many of you will have read the story in detail on the display boards provided by the Vendenham collection that were placed behind this aeroplane before it was moved out for its display. It started out as a bilateral arrangement with the French, because both Britain and France required up-to-date aerial intelligence. In the spring of 1939, and it was converted for its future reconnaissance role by the Cunliffe Owen Company at Eastleigh and by Air Work at Heston. They installed a pair of 16-inch square camera ports in the bottom of the fuselage for a split pair of F-24 reconnaissance cameras with 10% overlap. There was also an aperture in the cabin door for a handheld camera and small camera ports in the wing leading edges. They each carried a single forward-facing electron reporter camera synchronized so the aircraft could take stereoscopic imagery. Cotton's assistant photographer, Patricia Martin, devised two further modifications for this airplane. One was a teardrop window on the port side of the cockpit, which could be a position record camera, and also she had the idea of fitting pipework to divert hot air from the engine exhausts across the lens of the starboard belly camera so it wouldn't fog up at high altitudes. This aircraft went on to be flown operationally by Cochrane and by his co-pilot, a Canadian, flying officer Bob Niven, whose logbook survived, and they reveal the sort of secret missions this aircraft flew. It started out in mid-June 1939 by flying to Malta, and then on reconnaissance missions covering key places in the Italian Empire, as far afield as Italian Somaliland and Libya. Then, on the 13th of August 1939, undertook a 6-hour, 10-minute flight from its base at Heston to the area of Wilhelmshaven, capturing Luftwaffe airfields and the East Frisian Islands. Towards the end of that month, there were two sorties again out and back all the way from Heston, photographing naval objectives in the North German coastal areas. Associated with Sidney Cotton's cover story, which related to his involvement with the manufacturer of photographic film, but records show that the aircraft undertook no photography on those occasions. Its last visit to Berlin was connected confronted with an abortive attempt to fly the Reichsmarschall and Goering to Britain for peace talks.
Stay for it.
Thank you, Sophia.
Then when war broke out, obviously this aircraft was no longer able to undertake missions close to, let alone over, Germany. Instead, it started flying sorties such as to Ireland's west coast to check on reports of German U-boats refuelling there, and to Dutch and Belgian ports to monitor their defences. The aircraft was then taken in charge by the RAF, often flying to France before the French armistice. Its flying career temporarily was ended when a parachute mine was dropped at the base of Heston on the 19th of September 1940. It was then returned to the USA for repair. It then went through the hands of all sorts of owners until it came back to the UK 82 years after it had left. This was when it was acquired by Fighter Aviation Engineering. Air Leasing at Sywell, as you can see, did a superb job on the restoration. It flew again from there on the 27th of March 2023, and it's one of quite a high number of Lockheed 12s still airworthy today, but none quite boast the history of this one.
We airbrushed the bloke out behind.
We took airbrushing for my life.